Good morning. I am the Reverend Denise Gouch. My pronouns are she, her, and I serve as the assistant minister of this congregation. It is my pleasure to welcome you to worship with the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville. As Unitarian Universalists, our spiritual paths vary, but in this congregation, we have made a covenant together. We affirm our interdependence, celebrate our differences, and work for justice. We are a welcoming congregation, and we deepen our relationships as we serve our congregation's mission to create community, nurture spiritual growth, and act on our values in the broader world, guided by reason and compassion. I'd like to extend a special welcome to visitors worshiping with us this morning. If you are seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you might find it here. If you have questions about our congregation, please contact me. You can find my email address in the staff directory under Contact Us on our website. If you are live with us right now on Zoom, won't you please say hello in the chat? We love knowing you're here. No matter what platform you're using, you can find helpful information like ways to give, faith development resources for all ages, reopening plans, and more in the worship portal on our website, firstuunash.org. We are so glad you're joining us for worship.
Good morning. My name is Lori. Good morning. My name is Lori Samuels. I'm a member of the congregation and I sing in the choir and am one of the trustees of the Endowment Trust. Our morning song is based on loving kindness meditation, a method for developing compassion and unconditional love. Loving kindness meditation comes from the Buddhist tradition, but it can be adapted and practiced by anyone, regardless of a religious affiliation. I hope you will join in as Karina Daza invites us to lift our voices and spirits in song.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with
Good morning. My name is Elaine Bailey. My pronouns are she, her. I am co-chair of worship and sing at the chamber choir of our church. Our call to worship this morning was written by Kimberly Ann Tomchak Carlson. It is not by chance that you arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource that belongs to all of us when we share. And so, you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. Welcome to worship. We light the chalice with the words of the covenant of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville. We gather in safe and compassionate community, seeking our spiritual truths. We affirm our interdependence, celebrate our differences, and create a thoughtful and harmonious voice for liberal religion. Through the practice of the principles of our faith, we promote social, economic, and environmental justice and continue our legacy of respect and acceptance. We covenant together in a spirit of love and freedom.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Diane Dowgiert, and my pronouns are she, hers. 1 year ago, I began serving as developmental lead minister of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville. A developmental ministry is a special kind of ministry where the congregation and minister work together on specific goals. When the goals are accomplished and a new minister has been called, the developmental minister moves on. By nature, a developmental minister is an itinerant, which is someone who moves frequently from place to place. A year ago, as I began, as I always do when starting a new ministry, I unpacked my suitcase. You may recall the contents of that suitcase because I unpacked it right here. Part of the contents were my robe and stole, which I keep with me, and they remind me of the sacred nature of my work. And when we gather in person, it's likely you will see me in that robe from time to time. I also brought my collection of Kindle books, which is where I keep all of the books and sources of wisdom that our Unitarian Universalist tradition draws upon. I brought my flaming chalice pendant, which keeps the symbol of our faith close to my heart. And you may remember, I brought my walking shoes, because the walking shoes are a reminder that though I walk with you on this journey for a time, the time will come when I must move on. The walking shoes remind me to make the most of every moment that we have together, because we know that our time is limited. But isn't that the way it is with life? So unpacking my suitcases and my walking shoes reminds me of someone from our Unitarian Universalist history who was also good at packing and unpacking, moving about from place to place. His name was Quillen Shin. Quillen's kind of an old-fashioned name. He was perhaps the best known Universalist of his day. He lived over a century ago, over 100 years ago. And he was an itinerant. And because he lived 100 years ago, his travels were always on horseback. Some people called him the grasshopper missionary, and others called him the St. Paul of the Universalist Church. He earned those names because he was truly on a mission to spread the gospel of universalism all across the country. The word gospel simply means good news. The Reverend Quillen Shin was on a mission to share the good news of universal salvation, which is one way of saying that everyone is lovable in the eyes of God, and therefore everyone will eventually go to heaven. This was indeed good news for the people of his day, the people of Quillen Shin's day, who were used to hearing a different message from their preachers, a message that said that only some were acceptable to God and that everyone else was doomed to an eternity in hell. Not a happy message. Shin was so convinced that the people longed for a different message. And he was so convinced of the truth of universal salvation, but that by the time of his death in 1907, he had taken his message to every state in the United States, as well as some places in Mexico and Canada. And I've heard that he sometimes gave a sermon a day. He founded 8 churches, oversaw the construction of at least 40 church buildings, and brought universalism to hundreds, if not thousands, of people. He reportedly encouraged more than 30 people to take up the Universalist ministry. He had a special interest in the South and was recognized with the title of missionary to the Southern states, a title that he bore until his death. Shin worked as a Southern missionary 10 months of the year, and for 2 months led camp meetings in the North, where he helped establish camps and conference centers, including Ferry Beach, which is on an island off the Maine coast. And it is still a Unitarian Universalist camp and conference center to this day. Shin lived his life according to the belief he preached, that all Universalists must be missionaries. We are all called to carry that message of good news. And I'm told that registering for the summer conference at Ferry Beach in 1904, he listed his home as everywhere. And here ends the story.
Thank you, Diane. It's good to hear about Quillen Shin, and it's really nice that your walking shoes have brought you back from vacation to us. You may know that we share every Sunday's collection with an organization whose work outside our walls aligns with our values. Our Share the Plate partner for the month of August is the Nashville International Center for Empowerment, whose mission is to ensure that refugees and immigrants living in Nashville achieve their full potential now and for generations to come. You can learn more in the worship portal at firstuunash.org, where you can also find the link to our online donation form. As always, your gifts, like your presence among us, are received with gratitude.
Thank you, Holling. And now that we have all been soothed and comforted by Holling's beautiful piano music, and our hearts have been opened by gratitude and generosity, I invite you into a time of prayerful meditation. You may want to begin by arranging your body into a comfortable position, one that allows for the full movement of breath, a position that makes you feel supported. Allow your body to settle into that feeling of support. And when you feel settled, bring to your attention the image of the flaming chalice. It may be one that is physically present with you, or maybe one that you can pull up in memory, maybe the flaming chalice in the sanctuary here at church. Notice how the chalice cup is a safe container for the flame. Notice the warmth and light coming from the flame. The chalice is a symbol of our covenant of mutual care and support. The flame is a symbol of the transforming fire of love, the universal love available to all. Now I invite you to notice what it is you are carrying with you today. What baggage do you need to unpack? What burdens, what struggles, sorrows, concerns, or anything that may be troubling your heart today? Imagine what it would feel like to put those burdens down, what it would feel like to have them held in the safe container of this covenanted community, giving them over to the transforming fire of love. It may help to make a physical gesture with your hands, turning your hands palms downward as if letting go, and then allowing your hands to gently come to rest in your lap. When you feel centered in your body, you may then want to turn your palms face up in a gesture of openness and receptivity. And in that open and receptive place, let us pray. Spirit of life and spirit of love, source of all being, be with us. May all we bring with us today be received and carried in the loving cup of community. May the transforming power of love move in us and among us, holding us, sustaining us, uplifting us, so that we may live into the fullness of who we are becoming. May we be open to receiving the gifts of life, that we may fulfill our covenant. May we know that we are held by a universal love that will not let us go. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.
Our reading this morning is by Rebecca Parker. Let us covenant with one another to keep faith with the source of life, knowing that we are not our own, earth made us. Let us covenant with one another to keep faith with the community of resistance, never to forget that life can be saved from that which threatens it by even small bands of people choosing to put into practice an alternative way of life. And let us covenant with one another to seek for an ever deeper awareness of that which springs up inwardly in us. Even when our hearts are broken by our own failure or the failure of others, cutting into our lives, even when we have done all we can and life is still broken, there is a universal love that has never broken faith with us and never will. This is the ground of our hope and the reason we can be bold in seeking to fulfill the promise. And thus ends our reading.
To belong is the greatest human need. Meeting all other needs is dependent on it. We are not separate beings, but integral parts of a greater whole, integrated into the fabric of life. If you doubt this is true, I invite you right now to take a deep breath and then let it out. The air you drew into your lungs did not come from you, and yet you are dependent on that air to live. The air you breathed out was returned to the larger whole. We are utterly dependent on sources of life beyond ourselves for our very survival. In the face of this reality, our Unitarian Universalist faith holds good news that there is a source of life, an interconnected web of life from which we can never ultimately be severed. We belong to this earth and we belong to each other. We are born into a covenant of belonging. A covenant is a promise, a sacred vow of mutual care. Covenant is the very fiber of which the web is woven. Covenant is what holds it all together. I have an ongoing argument with a friend of mine, a friend who maintains that the universe does not care what happens to them, that at best, the universe is indifferent. My comeback to that friend is always this. It's that the universe is not separate from us, that we are part of the universe. We are made of the same stuff as the moons and the stars and the planets. We care what happens to each other, and so long as we do, care is part of the nature of the universe. We are born on this planet, this earth, which is also an integral part of the universe, an earth that provides everything we need, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat, and human companions to provide shelter, protection, comfort, love, and care. If this isn't a sacred promise, I don't know what is. A promise not written in words, but in oceans and streams, in wind and clouds, in fruit and field, in sun and soil, written in the wild diversity of creatures that inhabit this earth, including humankind. In return for this abundance, we are called to care for each other and to care for the earth. The universe is not indifferent to our need, so long as we fulfill our part of the promise, our part of the covenant of belonging. If there is one lesson we can take from the past year and a half, it is the importance of belonging. One impact of the pandemic has been to disrupt patterns of belonging, restricting who we could be with and where we could gather. It's been like living in exile, banned from our sacred places, like living in diaspora, dispersed and scattered, but still connected by kinship or friendship or collegiality, or connected by the bonds of a common faith. When Quillen Shin, the 19th century itinerant Universalist preacher, took his message of universal salvation to every corner of the nation, I can't help but think it was out of a profound sense of belonging wherever he went. The kind of belonging engendered by his belief in universal salvation, which to me means that no one can ever be ultimately severed from the source of life, a source which Shin named God. Shin's sense of belonging wasn't dependent on a specific place or a specific group of people, but dependent on his unshakable faith in the universal love of God, that if no one would be doomed to an eternity in hell, everyone would be going to heaven. Things have changed since Quillen Shin's day. Our understanding of the world and how it works has changed. We don't talk so much about heaven and hell as other worldly places, but as conditions that we create right here on earth. We have many different ways of naming the source of life from which we come and can never be ultimately severed from. Some call it love, some call it the universe, some call it the great mystery beyond all knowing, some call it God, and many other ways of naming this ultimate reality. These days, we speak of universal salvation more in terms of collective liberation, of freeing ourselves and each other from oppressive forces that create conditions of hell, while also holding out a vision for the beloved community here on earth. We belong to each other and we belong to this earth. We are part of a covenant of belonging. A covenant is a promise. It was the Jewish theologian Martin Buber who said that we are the promise-making, promise-breaking, promise remaking people. We live at a time of broken promises, and the consequences of those broken promises are becoming more evident every day. You know the litany as well as I. Raging fires, rising seas, endless wars, people divided against each other here and around the world. But you know all this. Somewhere along the way, humankind forgot the profound and simple truth that we belong to each other. We belong to life. This past year and a half has taught me how utterly dependent we are on each other for our very survival, how the actions of one person can impact countless others for better or for worse. Put another way, actions have consequences. Everything we do matters, for we hold not just our own, but the well-being of others in our hands. This is what it means to belong. If you are like me, you have arrived at this day somewhat wiser with your own learnings and lessons. You may also have arrived at this day somewhat frayed in spirit, maybe even broken. We've been through a collective trauma, and it isn't over yet. This is especially true for parents, grandparents, and any who are primary caregivers of school-aged children and small children who are not yet eligible to be vaccinated. If this is you, know that you are close to my heart right now. We are all in need of healing. It is important to keep expectations of ourselves and of each other realistic, taking time to fill ourselves and each other with loving kindness. This too is what it means to belong. Another thing these past months have taught me is that we need each other not just to survive, we need each other to thrive. We are made for community, made for belonging. As Shakespeare noted, absence makes the heart grow fonder. If you are like me, this time of exile, this time of living in diaspora, dispersed and physically disconnected, has created a deep longing to be in community with those who share the common bond of a common faith. I can't tell you how surprisingly happy it made me after my month away for some time of vacation and study to log on to Zoom for my weekly round of meetings with various groups and committees of the church. It made me surprisingly happy to see faces on the screen, faces of people, most of whom I have never met in person, yet care about and feel connected to. This too is what it means to belong. A covenant of belonging is ultimately a promise of care and commitment, care for the earth and all her creatures, a commitment to uphold the goodness of life so that all may flourish. In the words of Rebecca Parker, let us covenant with one another to keep faith with the source of life, knowing that we are not our own. Earth made us. Even when our hearts are broken by our own failure or the failure of others, cutting into our lives. Even we have done all we can and life is still broken. There is a universal love that has never broken faith with us and never will. Parker's words resonate with the message Quillen Shin carried across the country more than a century ago, a message that echoes through our lives today. Salvation is for everyone. Our liberation is collective. We are part of the universe, a universe made caring by the presence of our care. We are an inextricable part of an interconnected web of life. The fiber of that web is love, a universal love holding us all, a love that will not let us go. May we rest in this love.
Our closing song is There Is a Love by Elizabeth Norton, the music director at First Parish in Concord, Massachusetts. We are led by members of North Lake UU Church of Kirkland, Washington, as they celebrated their 60th anniversary this past May. I hope you will join in the singing.
Words for the chalice extinguishing were written by Elizabeth Sell Jones. Please join with me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I leave you today with words of a covenant that was written by James Villa Blake. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This service has ended. May our service to the world continue renewed. Go in peace, go in love.